conversation today is I'll be talking on the India-Middle East relations. So, usually what happens is that when we talk of the region Middle East, we feel that it's a homogeneous, it's a homogeneous region probably with same kind of religion, because the kind of things that comes to your mind is Islam, conflict. So we see it in a homogeneous canvas. But surprisingly, Middle East is a very heterogeneous region. In terms of the political system, we see that there is a theocratic system in Iran. Then there is a monarchy in most of the Gulf countries. Then there is a secular form of government in some of the other countries, and democracy prevailing in Israel and other countries. So there is a different kinds of political system that is there. Not just the political systems, the geography itself is very varied. If it is a region, it is a region within regions. There are many regions. If I can spell them out, there are about 5 regions in the Middle East. Maghreb, which comprises of the northwestern part of Africa. Then there's Mashriq, which includes Egypt and some of the other Arab countries in the region. Then there is Gulf, of course, everybody is aware of the Gulf countries, the 8 countries in the Gulf region. Then there is Levant, which is in the Mediterranean region. And then there is Eastern Mediterranean, where Israel, Turkey, and all those countries are situated. So what I'm trying to say is that the region is very varied. In terms of religion also, mostly when we talk about, Middle East, we only speak of Islam probably, but it is a region from where the 3 monotheistic religions have taken birth. For example, Islam, Judaism, as well as Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. So it's not a homogeneous region; it's a very heterogeneous region. There are about 20 countries in the region. If starting from Algeria ending to Yemen, so there are about 20 countries in the region. And why I'm saying 20 is because India also recognizes Palestine as a state. So I've included Palestine also in that. There are many ethnic communities. For example, there are Arabs, there are Circassians, there are Chechens, there are Armenians. So lots of ethnic communities are also there in the region. So once we have established that Middle East is a heterogeneous region, and why I started with this was because that is why India's foreign policy has been independent for a very long time, and it continues to be independent because you have to deal with so many different kinds of countries in the region. If I can talk about the 3 major countries in the region, and of course, UAE is coming up as another 4th important country in the region. The 3 important countries historically were Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, and now UAE has also joined the bandwagon. So because of these complexities, we also know that the region is ridden with conflict, and the countries don't see eye to eye to each other, and that's why we have to have a very balanced kind of attitude when we talk about India's relations with the region. Now, but India's relation with the region has changed tremendously, from India being a benign power in the past to India now being a pragmatic and a strategic partner of most of the countries in the region. So how has this shift taken place from ideologically driven India to the India of today, where it is showcasing a very pragmatic foreign policy with the region? In the coming times, I'll be discussing about those. Now, when I'm talking about this shift in the equation of India with the Middle Eastern countries, there are many factors and actors which are responsible for this change in the relationship. Now, if I have to club these factors and actors together, there are 3 categories I can chart out. One is the international actors and factors which have prevailed in India's engagement with the Middle East. There are regional factors and actors, and then there are domestic or the inward-looking policies that have been responsible for India's relations with the Middle East region. Now, based on these, well, I'll come to that later on. Now, why Middle East is important to India? I think that is the most important question. I mean, today we are discussing about so many important regions, so many important countries. Middle East is one region which is least studied in India. I mean, if you look at it, there are only numbered universities or think tanks which focus on Middle East. Middle East has not been a major focus of Indian foreign policy. But I am going to tell you why Middle East is important to India. Of course, energy comes to one's mind first and foremost. Of the 84% of the energy requirements that India has, 55% comes from the Middle East, comes from the Gulf countries in the Middle East. When it comes to defense, we all know that, of course, Russia is the most important country with regard to defense imports, but 13% of India's arms imports come from Israel. And it is the third largest defense import partner of India. When it comes to expatriates, it is believed that 8.5 to 9 million population, I mean, this is the government record, 8.5 to 9 million people live in the Gulf countries alone. And if one is to believe Professor Irudaya Rajan, who is a migration expert in the country, there are about 10 million population in the Middle East, 10 million Indians in the Gulf itself. If you extend it to other countries in the region, it may be around 12 millions probably. So it is a huge, influx destination for Indians in the region. 33% of the total remittances that India receives comes from the Gulf alone. Now, coming to the trade. Of the total trade that India has, 24% comes from the Gulf alone. Extended to other countries in the region, 28% of the total trade is from the Middle Eastern countries. Of the 25 top trading partners of India, 6 are from the region. Who are these countries? UAE comes at 3rd, Saudi Arabia at 4th, Iraq at 6th, Qatar at 22nd, and Kuwait and Oman at 25th. So there are 6 countries in the top trading 25 countries list that are from the region. Now, coming to the strategic partnership, we are living in the times of strategic partnerships. India has signed over 30 strategic partnership agreements with countries all across the world. 5 of them are from the region itself, from Saudi Arabia to Iran to Oman to UAE to Israel. So with 5 countries, India has signed such strategic partnership agreements, which out of 30, if you look at it, is almost a quarter. So if this is not something which is important for India, one can say that the region is key to India's growth story. And to an extension, the region is responsible for India's social progress, its economic development, its political ascendance, and in the times to come, probably in its defense industry enhancement. So this is why the Middle East region is important. It being studied is also important in the country. Unfortunately, that is not happening to the level that it should. Now, like I said, that 3 factors and actors have been responsible for transforming India's relations from the past, from a transactional behavior that India had with the region to the strategic partnerships that it has today with the countries in the region. What I have done is I have divided the relations in 6 phases. So what I'm going to do is I'll be defining each one of them one by one, so that there is some clarity. Usually what happens is when we talk about Middle East and India relations, mostly it is about the economy, the energy, the trade. This is what is focused, but what is not focused is that how these relations have progressed over the centuries. So the first phase in the relationship is on the I have marked it as the prehistoric relations that India had, and also how the relations had changed with the advent of Islam in 7th century. So this is the time when there was no discovery of oil had not taken place, and the relations between India as a country was not, India was not there as a country. It was there as probably a civilization. So civilizational connections were there, and later on there was a dynastic relation that India had with the region. So if I have to divide in two phases, first there was a relationship between Indus Valley and Dilmun, or the to an extension the Mesopotamian civilizations. So in that time, there are, there are artifacts which have been collected, which signify that there was a very flourishing trade that was taking place between the Indus Valley civilization and the civilizations in the Middle East. With the advent of Islam in 7th century, we see that there was a lot of maritime trade that was happening between the countries through maritime means. And this is the time when we see that there was a cultural connect also happening between the countries in the region and with India. Most of these, these travelers or these traders, they had settled in the southern part of India, especially in the Calicut area. So the southwestern part and the southeastern part of the country was, was the settlement point for the Middle Eastern traders. If one wants to go into detail, I would suggest Amitav Ghosh's book, wherein he talks about wherein he through some letters that he had got from Egyptian libraries, he is talking about a conversation happening between a slave of a Jewish trader settled in India on the import and exports of the trade items. Like I said, that this was the time when the Cheras, Cholas, and the Pandyas were ruling in the country. So a lot of intermarriages and mixing had taken place in the southwestern part of India. Historically, when we what we see is that, and it has stayed till this time, that there is a mention of Mopillas. So who were the Mappilas? The Mappilas were the foreign Muslim traders, who had settled in the coast of India. So they have their dynasty or their progeny has still prevailed in these regions. So they are still, proliferating in these regions, and they were given titles of Mappilas, which is a very honorary title. It is a very a title of endearment, a title of respect that was given to these traders. And the trade that happened between the countries was in terms of pearls, spices, cotton, metals, and stones. The third phase in this phase one, which was responsible for India's interaction with the Middle East countries, was when the Mughals came to India in 1526. In the 7th century AD, when the Mappilas were, establishing themselves in India, with them, the Sunni jurisprudence that was popular in India was the Safi Sunni. So they were all Safi, they were not Hanafi. Only when in 1526, when the Mughals had come to India from the northwestern borders, from Central Asia, that was the time when the Hanafi tradition had prevailed in India. And it had prevailed further. And that is why what we see in India today is that the Hanafi tradition is, Hanafi Sunnis are more in number than the Safi Sunnis. And because of this reason, we had a sort of natural bonhomie towards Turkey, towards the Ottoman Empire. And that is the reason why the Khilafat movement was against the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire. So from phase one, we shift to phase two. Now, phase two is from is till 1947. This is majorly the phase wherein, we'll be talking about the British Raj. What was the relation between India and the region during the British Raj? Now, most of these countries, the now countries and then protectorates, they were the protectorates of British Empire, and they were administered from India, and Indian soldiers were sent in the region for garrisoning these protectorates. So, now we see that there's a first time that Indians had gone to the region. Up until now, what we saw was that there was incoming of Mappilas more into India, but not from the country itself. During the British time, this changed. Indian soldiers started going to the region. Now, what is interesting to note is that till 1947, Middle East was not our extended neighbor. It was an immediate neighbor. Before the partition of India and the independence of or formation of Pakistan, Middle East was our immediate neighbor. This was also the time when the discovery of oil had taken place. And with the discovery of oil, the trade component had changed. In the first phase, the trade that we had with the Middle East was in favor of India. There was a positive trade balance. Most of the products were sent from India to the region. Import was higher than the exports. Now, this is the time when that dynamic changed. Now, what was happening is that most of our trade was oil-based or energy-based trade. This is the time when the relations were actually transactional in nature. However, the transaction of these oil or the other imports or other import-export items, it was done in Indian rupee, which was pegged with the British pound. Like I said, there was a change in the trade balance. There was a negative trade balance, and it was mainly based on oil. Next, we move to the third phase, which is from 1947 to 1991. Now, this is the phase wherein we'll be talking about most of the international, regional, and the inward-looking policies. So, this was the time when India had gained independence, 1947. India had to rebuild itself. India's focus was on economic growth. So India had to follow inward-centric policies. Middle East was no longer your immediate neighbor. It had become your extended neighbor because this was also the time when the partition took place. Relations were largely transactional, again, based on oil. The relations were rather cold. Why were they cold? They were cold because of 2-3 reasons. One is that there was a Cold War reality. India had adopted NAM. India had adopted the non-aligned movement. So it was not interacting with it was not aligning or not interacting with the other countries so much. Interestingly, while India did not have major relations with most of the countries, even though it had signed diplomatic agreements and diplomatic relations, it has, in principle, it had signed diplomatic relations in 1950s onwards, but there was no relations as such. It was very subdued. Interestingly, there were 2 countries with which India had a very good relations. For example, with Egypt and Syria. Why? Because Egypt and Syria were also non-aligned. And they were the first countries, Egypt under Nasser and Syrian seculars, they were flagging, against the allies. So they wanted to be non-aligned. And India, together, along with Egypt and along with other countries, became a proponent of non-alignment. So, and most of the countries in the region, except these 2 countries, they all had pitched their tents in the US camp. So there was a Cold War reality there. There was a Cold War dichotomy. So India could not have engaged relations with the countries in the region. Then there was a religious secular dichotomy. India wanted to see itself as a secular country. India was a secular country. Most of the countries in the region were, even if, for that matter, if you look at Israel, it called itself a Jewish democracy. It was a Jewish state. And other countries, for instance, they were all, I mean, sort of, like they were mostly Muslim identities. They had adopted Muslim identities. So there was a religious secular dichotomy as well. Then the most important factor was the Pakistan factor. Pakistan had gotten close to US, and Pakistan, because of the religious angle, it had gotten close to most of the countries in the region. So it was very difficult for India to have a good relation, or to open itself, or to have a warm embrace with the region. Also, what happened was that India, there was a lot of internal turmoils. Also, there was Muslim sentiments. India already had Muslim minority who were in good numbers. It could not have relations with Israel because of this sentiment, because it did not want to have bad equations with the Gulf or the Arab countries. So India largely did not have relations with anyone, or very subdued relations with all the countries in the region except the two of them. This was also the time when the oil boom in 1970s had taken place, and Gulf migration to Gulf countries was at its peak. It was increasing and it was at its peak. So this was the time when the 3 E's were the focus. What were the 3 E's? The economy, the expatriate, and the energy. Economy and energy were already there. Expatriate, after the 1970s boom, that had also increased. So the focus was on these 3 areas. Then we come to the 4th phase, which is 1991 to 2003. Now, this was the time when the Cold War had ended. There was a disintegration of Soviet Union. There was a major shift or recalibration in the international relations. From alliance to, countries were shifting from alliance to partnership. With the disintegration of Soviet Union, India had a defense dependence on Russia, and India was already had 2 wars with Pakistan, so it needed defense partners. Even though Russia's defense sector was strong enough to support India in that matter, but then India wanted to diversify its defense partnership, and therefore it normalized its relations so it was also one of the reasons why India normalized its relations with Israel in January 1992. Now, another thing that happened at the same time was that the Soviet forces had withdrawn from Afghanistan in 1989. So and India always wanted to play a role in Afghanistan because of the richness of resources that Afghanistan had. So what India did was, to play a role in Afghanistan, India partnered with Iran to reconstruct Afghanistan. This is the reason why, if you look at Iran does not, in the MEA division of India, Iran is not included in the Gulf division. It is included in the AFPAC division of the Ministry of External Affairs. This is the reason why this thing happened. Now, like I said, that India had relations with Israel. India had partnership with Iran. So what was happening is that India was elevating its relations. India was building its relations with adversaries, the 2 adversaries, Iran and Israel. And in a couple of years, it was also developing its relations with Saudi Arabia. So it had to manage 3 countries which were adversaries to each other. So this was the time when India adopted a strategic autonomy. India had already adopted strategic autonomy. So this is the 2000s phase was the time when India adopted its strategic autonomy, and it used it specifically in the region. It said that we are going to be non-interventionist, we are going to be non-prescriptive, but based on our national interest, we are going to have independent foreign policy with all the countries in the region. We are not going to meddle with your domestic issues, but we are going to be, having good relations with all of you. But the strategic partnership had not taken place. India was slow in that time. However, because we are talking about 1991 and 2003 phase, the first strategic partnership agreement was already signed with Iran in 2003 under the Delhi Declaration. Now we move to the fifth phase, the 2003 and the 2014. Today, we talk of the Link West policy. However, the seeds of the Link West policy were already sown in this phase, the 2003 and the 2014 phase. India had already started, why I'm saying it, because India had already started to elevate its relations with the Gulf countries, with Israel, and with other countries in the region. It started to have strategic partnership agreements with UAE, with Oman, with Saudi Arabia. It started to have defense cooperation agreements with Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and other countries, security cooperation with so many countries. So it has already started to elevate its relationship. Security, like I said, security and defense cooperation agreements were signed, joint projects were signed. And this was also the time when, after the Arab uprising or the Arab Spring, so-called Arab Spring, the countries were focusing on the economic diversification. They no longer, especially the countries in the Gulf, they no longer wanted to trade just in oil. They wanted to diversify their economy. And this was in India's interest, because now India was collaborating with these countries and the other countries in non-conventional areas as well. So it became a very important phase in India's, in fact, it is a precondition to what India is having today with the region. This was a precondition phase, if we can say that it was. Next, we move to the sixth phase, the 2014 and the present, and of course, it will go on for longer maybe. This is the time when, like I said, in the earlier past, when India had a transactional kind of relation with the region, there were 3 E's that were focused on: the economy, expatriates, and the economy, economy, expatriates, and energy. The fourth pillar of the relationship today is based on the defense and the maritime sector. We are also engaging with the countries in the region on edutech, fintech, agri-tech, and defense tech. E-commerce and construction industries are flourishing. There are joint partnerships taking place in these areas. Countries in the region are also supporting India in its Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, in its Make in India initiatives. There are major cooperations in terms of outer space, in blockchain, in cybersecurity, in counterterrorism, prisoner extradition, counter-radicalization, and there are n number of areas where the countries are exploring to, cooperate with each other. Now, all of this is fine, but like I said, that India has always been called a benign power in the region. It remains to be so today as well, and that's what I believe, because we are not an actor, we are a partner in the region. We are not an actor because we have always said that we are not going to have a prescriptive policy in the region. Unless we do so, we are not going to be an actor in the region. And now these are the positives of the relations. What are the negatives? We already know that the region is conflict ridden. So one doesn't know that, whether this relationship, we have already seen the example of Iran. We had to cut down, and now we are not importing from Iran at all because of the removal of the waivers, because of the sanctions. So if this situation occurs with other countries of the region, India will have to diversify. And India is already diversifying its energy requirements with Venezuela, with Nigeria, and with US. However, what is happening is that there is a cost benefit analysis that India will have to do. So there is a, this is a challenge. Like I said, international actors have always played a very prominent role in deciding India's relations with the region. Russia has been one, British has been one, US has also played a role. Now China is playing a very active role. China has already started to show its strategic interest in the region, and that is why what is going to happen is that India will have to be very wary of this situation, this changing dynamics in the region. So how does India sort of, it has a good clout, no two ways about it, but how does India have, how can India play an active role is something that India will have to decide. But following this independent policy is not going to help. However, what we see is that, the internal dynamics, the regional dynamics that are changing, probably that will have a positive equation, have a positive role to play in India's engagement with the region. What are these developments that are happening? We have already seen that Abraham Accord has been signed, and recently in Israel, most of the Arab countries or the Gulf Arab countries had gone there. Arab countries, Egypt was also there. So all of these countries had gone for a joint talk. So probably India can have a multilateral as well as a bilateral. At a bilateral level, of course, it is working with the countries, but it is the need of the hour is that India should engage with the region in a multilateral format as well. So when this happens, probably, India will be seen as a major player in the region. Right now, it is not playing a role. And of course, the booming economic growth, because of the population growth, the market that India is providing for the region, these are the positives that India can have with the region. These are the positives that India has, but India will have to do a lot more to have a better equation with the region. I think I'll end at that. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Manjari. Very, very comprehensive, description of the subject. Very well explained, and I think the students will definitely benefit. And let us hope that there are some queries, and so that anything which is of use to them can come out from your explanation. Yes, please go ahead with questions.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for such an informative session. My name is Pranjal Kashyap and I'm doing a master's in IR from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Ma'am, my question is a little different. Ma'am, my question is like, since the advent of human civilization, we have seen that mobility remains an important symbol of human progress. And even right now, we are seeing the shift to electric vehicles. So, like, this is the first part. On the other hand, many countries in the Middle East are totally dependent on revenues from oil production and export. So, ma'am, how this shift to electric vehicles will affect the Middle Eastern economy in particular?
For a very long time, electrical vehicles and everything is fine, but it will take some time. It will take some time. When I'm saying, I mean, it may take about 15, 20 years for the entire world to be dependent on these vehicles. It is a good option for the developed nations, of course, but for the developing countries, because it is expensive, first of all, right now. Not the vehicle itself, but the internal parts, the assembly line production that is required to develop such electric vehicles. I think that is still expensive, and it is not accessible to all the countries or all the developing nations. So I think it will take some time, and oil is going to stay of course, it is a non-renewable resource, one can say, but then right now we don't have an option. And because of this, that is one of the reasons why the countries wanted to diversify as well, no? Because what is happening is that because they were oil based, so they could give some perks and privileges to their citizens. So in these Gulf countries, if you are a citizen of these countries, you don't have to pay your taxes. So there are many perks and privileges that are available. in the countries which after the, after the Arab Spring, and that was one of the reasons why the Arab Spring had taken place, because the oil revenues were not to the level that they were in the previous times. And that's why perks and privilege, there were austerity measures that were adopted. Certain taxation, achanak say if you tax somebody who have been living without paying taxes, they are going to, raise their voice against you. So that is what was happening. And because of this growing economic adversity, there was no non-availability of jobs, and there were other problems that were emerging in the society, and that's why the people were sort of, raising their voice against the governments and against the regimes. So that is going to happen, of course. And like I said, it's a conflict-ridden region. So if something like this happens, then it is going to be a problem for the region. But as of now, it's not going to affect in any near future.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yes, next question.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, my name is Akriti Verma, and I'm a final year student. Thank you for such an insightful session. Ma'am, I would just like to know that, could you please throw some light upon the opportunities of India in the Middle East, apart from the oil sector?
Opportunities for India in the Middle East. See, that's what I was explaining in the sixth phase, no? That right now what is happening, recently, what did we see? In February end, I guess, no, March, February end. So, we are having many non-conventional areas where we are cooperating with the region. The first one is on the counter, because we know that most of the, threats that India had was from the Salafi terrorist angle. So because of that, we could not, locate the terrorist, the terrorists in the 2008 terrorist Mumbai terror attacks. The convicts were sort of, their information was given from Saudi Arabia. And all of this changes is happening because we have signed certain agreements with these countries. So we have signed counter-terrorism and prisoner extradition treaties with these countries. So because of which it is becoming the counter-intelligence, the intelligence sharing part of it. It is a part of the relationship partnership agreement. So because of these things, we are getting a lot of intelligence from these countries, which was not available earlier. Second thing is Kashmir issue. I did not speak at length on that. What is happening today is that, for a very long time, Pakistan has been sort of, trying to make it an international issue. And because of its religious angle, for a very long time, it was trying to influence the OIC, the Islamic Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the countries in the Middle East. Now that is changing. If after the abrogation of Article 370, the countries in the region that had supported India's decision and said that it is India's internal matter were from the Middle East. UAE was there, Bahrain was there. So to a certain extent, Saudi Arabia also came in support of India. So you need support of these countries to, sort of, for your Kashmir issue, because otherwise Pakistan is going to internationalize it. The other areas wherein India is cooperating with the countries is in the defense sector. Like I said, in the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and recently, there was a news that the Israeli Prime Minister was to come to India, but he caught COVID. So defense partnership is one thing, even though we have very good defense arms trade relations with Israel, but we have not signed a defense cooperation with Israel as of now. And probably this visit could have, focused on that angle, that, we are going to enhance our relationship by signing a defense cooperation. The third thing is that, the military joint projects. So joint military projects is something that India is doing with the countries in the region. We have seen Indian armed forces training with the Israeli defense forces. There is joint exercises, joint naval exercises, and joint air exercises that is taking place between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and India. Then there are, so there are hordes of, such initiatives that have started to take place. In outer space, we have signed agreements with Israel as well as with the UAE. So that is one area. Now, the extent of relationship, if you want to understand, then when the COVID outbreak had taken place in March 2020, by June 2020, India was signing a cybersecurity agreement with Israel, because of which agreement Israel was going to provide India the security, the cyber attacks security. So security from cyber attacks. So all of these things, and to sort of engage with the country at a level of cybersecurity, it is not easy. It needs a trust building in the relationship, right? So these things are there that India has enhanced with the region, and these are very important aspects. Agri-tech is another industry wherein India is engaging with the region, especially with Israel. So I think these are the areas, non-conventional areas, wherein India is now building its relations with the region.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Manjari, there is I think somebody has put something in the chat box. Can you read it?
It's not a question. It's a comment, I guess, that the coins engraved with boats and ships are from Oman. That's very right. Yeah.
Myra, would you like to put a question?
That was not a question, but an observation that I found, on the prehistoric relations between India and Middle East. So I just remembered that thing, so I just
yeah.
Any other question? Dr. Majid, we will not detain you for a long time. And there is one observation that has come to my mind. Don't you think that the peace in Middle East is very, very, in the interest of India? I mean, this Abraham Accord or Arab Spring and all these things have, allowed India to move further in its relationship with the
Yeah.
So should we not see it as a positive sign, a positive development in the Middle East?
So that's what I'm saying, that Arab Spring, even though for the region it was a bad news, but for India, it surprisingly was a good news afterwards, because after that, what happened was that countries started to diversify. Before that, what they were doing is that in every election manifesto, if you look at it in the Arab countries, the first thing that they were talking about was on Palestine liberation. That changed after the Arab Spring, because now you have to focus on your domestics. Now you'll have to focus on your domestic development. Now you'll have to focus on giving jobs, providing employment to the population. So because of all these factors, they started to diversify. They started to work in other areas. And that's where India, relations with India had strengthened with the region. So of course it was a positive. Abraham Accord also, of course, and that's the reason why I said that not just bilaterally, with Abraham Accords, it has given India an opportunity to sort of engage at multilateral levels with the region. It has already, there was a foreign ministerial level talk that happened between the US, the UAE, Israel, and India, and because of which they had started to call it a Middle Eastern Quad. So of course, these things are important. These things are an opportunity for India, and because of these reasons, India is sort of increasing its engagement with the Middle East. So I agree with you.
Dr. Manjari, there is a well-known forum, Middle East Forum, AMEF. Don't you think such a forum is required in India also?
So that's what I'm saying. And unfortunately, in most of the think tanks also, because I am from CLAWS, and I see that focus is not there on Middle East. And, we are responsible for it, because for a very long time, our Indian administrative service, our Indian foreign services, probably to some extent, they might be responsible for it, because for a very long time, India was seen as a country from where your maids, your drivers, and your cooks come. And we are responsible for it because we portrayed ourselves like that. And we felt that because of this kind of population is not that important to us, probably. Because the NRIs in US, the NRIs in other Western countries were given more, weightage. They were given more importance. And like in the beginning, I mentioned that 30% of your remittances come from the Gulf. So they are responsible for your GDP. But still, they were not given importance. It is only now that the component of the population has changed now. The structure of the population has changed now. Now, not just the maids, the drivers and cooks are from India, but your engineers and your doctors are also from India. So that has changed, and probably because of that, our focus on the region has also changed. But before that, we were only seen as the country which sends these people to, and because of which, what is happening is that the expatriate population in India is a returnee. They are called as Gulf returnees. We don't have a permanent residency with the Gulf. And I think that is one area where we should be working on. If we don't have a permanent residency with the region, then your 10 to 12 million population at some point of time will come back. How are you going to employ them?
That is there, but I think major development is taking place in these countries. There is a demand, by the local population that there should be some reservation for the local
indigenization policies. Yes, sir.
So that is also going to be a little, controversial issue between India and these countries.
So, but actually, if I can be honest, that's not going to work. That indigenization is also a political, it's a political sort of decision. It is not a constructive decision. It is not going to make a difference, because the Gulf people, for a very long time, they are sort of, used to not working that much. They're used to the perks and privileges. And the Indian expatriates, because they have not been involved in the political, they were not very vocal in the political domain. So they are preferred. Indian workers are preferred over there. So that is going to remain. That's not going to change for a very long time. So indigenization, I feel that it's not going to affect that much, even though, constant uproars on indigenization. In 2020 also, when we were facing this COVID, that was a time when in Kuwait, I guess, in Kuwait, there was an uproar that we need to have indigenization policy and all sorts of things, but it never happened. So that is a problem, though.
So thank you, Dr. Manjari, for clarifying many issues regarding India's relationship with the Middle East. and you have explained very, very, I say, exhaustively, tracing the origin of this relationship in six phases, and brought the your conclusion to the present day times and the issues that are being faced at presently. We hope that India's relations with the countries of the Middle East will continue to grow, and I think it is in the interest of both Middle East and India. So once again, thank you very much for sparing time and for such a scholarly, presentation. I hope my students will definitely be benefited by what you have observed here. So thank you very much. And
Thank you,
with
sir.
your
Thanks for
with your permission, I would like to close the session. Thank you very much.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Ma'am.